Hello, my name is Dr. Tony Page, and I have been researching the Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra for some 30 years now. And in fact, I was the first person to put that great sutra in its entirety in English translation onto the World Wide Web. Today I would like to share with you some of the doctrines of the sutra on the great self, the true self of the Buddha, which is present in all beings and which is eternal, deathless and changeless. Now, some Buddhists will have and do have a lot of problems with such teachings, and they have two principal objections. They say, for example, that these teachings were only given as metaphors and were not intended to be taken literally. They've simply given as metaphors to encourage people to practice the Dharma, Buddhism. Well, in the Nirvana Sutra, the final Mahayana Sutra of the Buddha, delivered on the last day and night of his life upon earth, the Buddha always makes it very clear when he is speaking metaphorically or using similes and when he is speaking straight, undiluted fact. And the doctrines of the true self, or the Buddha Dhatu, the Buddha principle, the Buddha element, these are always given as fact, as reality, as truth. Although, of course, he uses on occasion similes to try to communicate something of the grandeur and greatness of the Buddha self. Next, many Buddhists will say that these sutras and these teachings are in fact aimed at lower level students of Buddhism. They are not to be taken as definitive statements of the Dharma. They are for a particular level of student of Buddhism, namely those who cannot handle the non-self and the emptiness teachings well, and who need reassurance that there is some kind of true self. Well, again, this is very easy to dispose of because the Buddha in the Nirvana Sutra and other similar sutras of the Buddha nature class emphatically states that these doctrines are aimed at very high-level bodhisattvas and in fact are aimed at monks who have already passed through and traversed the teachings of non-self and emptiness and have mastered those and now are to be given the final, definitive, the culminating dimension of Dharma, which is the Buddha nature teaching, the Buddha self or the Buddha essence. So if people say to you that these teachings were intended just as a provisional low-level grade of teaching, you can say quite rightly that this is fully contradicted by the Buddha himself, where he states the precise opposite in the very last set of teachings he gave while still embodied on this earth. Now let's move to the words of the Buddha himself rather than the opinions of later commentators. Let's move to the words of the Buddha from the Nirvana Sutra and see what he says on the nature of the unconditioned, the state of liberation, moksha, which is the state of Buddha. He says in the chapter of the Nirvana Sutra called On the Four Methods of Teaching, he says this: unconditioned means that liberation is not like a jar made by a potter which will subsequently break. Liberation is subject to neither birth nor destruction. That which is liberation is the Tathagata, for he is not born and does not die. That which is not born, not perishing, devoid of old age, devoid of death, and unconditioned is the Tathagata, the Buddha. End of quote. So there you see, the Buddha very clearly says that the Buddha is not a conditioned entity. He's not something that is made up of all sorts of causes and conditions and causes and results. No, he was never born. He wasn't generated through the union of parents or any kind of causes, and he wasn't the result. The Buddha, as ultimate truth, has always been here. It's unconditioned and deathless. Now let's go to another sutra of the same type, the Mahayana Angulimala Sutra, the Angulimala Sutra. Here, the Buddha teaching on the partial nature of the non-self doctrine is made very clear. Non-self and emptiness as well, of course, are extremely important teachings, but they are not the totality of the Dharma. And if one teaches Buddhism only along the lines of non-self or no self, that is not presenting a balanced and complete picture of the Buddhic truth. And in the Angulimala Sutra, we read the following: those who think that non-self is the Dharma because they do not understand the Tathagata's underlying meaning, fall like moths into the lamp of ignorance. The blessed Buddhas of the past did not find the absence of the Tathagata Garbha in any being. The blessed Buddhas of the present, too, do not find the absence of the Atma Dhatu, the self principle, in any being. The blessed Buddhas of the future also will not find the absence of the Sattva Dhatu, the essence of being, in any being. End of quote. So there we have the Buddha's teaching that the true self, the self, is real. It's seen by all Buddhas of past, present, and future, and that to teach only non-self is to really destroy oneself spiritually like a moth in the flame of a lamp, a very unpleasant fate which we should avoid. Finally, I would like to give you a very important statement of the Buddhas from the chapter entitled Grief, taken from the Nirvana Sutra, the Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra, the Tibetan version. Now, this passage is extremely important because it defines what the nature of the self really is. And I can bet you, I can guarantee that if you are a follower of Gelugpa Buddhism, that none of your Gelugpa gurus or teachers has ever given you this passage from the Buddha. Why that's the case is for those persons to answer. But let us listen now to the words of the Buddha given on his final night of teaching in the great Mahaparinirvana Sutra. Here is what he says. It is said that all phenomena are non-self. It is not true to say that all phenomena are non-self. The self, the Atman, Sanskrit, the Atman is reality, tattva. The Atman, the self, is permanent, nitya. The Atman, the self, is virtue, guna. The self is eternal, shashvata. The self is firm, dhruva. The self is peace. Let the four divisions of the assembly, that is the followers of the Buddha, strive to meditate upon that. End of quotation. So in this very, very significant passage, the Buddha reveals what the nature of the self is, what the nature of the Buddha is. Because the Buddha, as the Nirvana Sutra teaches us, the Buddha is the self. And the Buddha element, the Buddha nature, is in all beings. And that self, that nature, is reality. It's not a metaphor. It's reality. It's eternal. It's everlasting. And it is peace. So on those words, I would like to leave you for today and wish you every happiness in your practice of the Dharma, and I hope to see you again at some future date. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Bye for now. Bye.